around in a fluid inside a spiral bone in your ear called the cochlea. The sounds around you are sent through your ear, they pass through your eardrum and a series of tiny bones and then are turned into waves in the fluid of the cochlea. The stereocilia send messages to your brain depending on how they move in the fluid, just like seaweed drifting this way and that way in the ocean current. They read the movement of these waves and pass that information to your brain, where you can use it to understand the sound all around you. But here's the crazy part. These stereocilia are so accurate that they can detect if they move just one atom in distance. It's amazing. However, because they're not actual hairs, this means that as you age and they get damaged, they don't regrow like a regular hair would. Sadly, this is a problem for all mammals because birds, fish, and reptiles can all regrow these cells, so they don't experience hearing loss as they age. It's just us humans and our cats, dogs, and other mammals that have to deal with it. And you've probably already noticed that the first sounds you lose are higher frequency sounds. This means women and children are harder to understand than men because their voices are higher. But it's also why certain letters become harder to pick up. Consonants like S's and hard K's are much higher frequency than the low vibration of a vowel like an O or an R. You can try it for yourself, just if you try a few and compare it to something like an O or an R, you can easily hear that those hard consonants are much higher pitched than the low vowels. And the problem is, when you lose some of those consonants, it doesn't just mean that you lose a letter here and there from a sentence. No, it means you really struggle to tell where one word ends and another one begins. So even if you hear most of the sounds that someone is saying, it's like you've lost your navigation. When humans talk, we're not actually listening to every single sound the other person says. Your brain is constantly modeling and predicting and spotting patterns to kind of fill in the blanks all the time. That's how you're able to process this information so quickly, and why, even if someone speaks with a different accent or a tone that you're not used to, your brain can still work out what they're saying pretty easily. But as you age and you lose those higher frequencies, you lose so much information when you miss some of those consonant sounds. And now you actually have to listen to every sound and try to use that to understand the meaning. This is why you find it so much more tiring to listen to people than before when you have hearing loss. Conversations when you have good hearing are a passive process. You just do it without thinking. But when you have hearing loss, if you want to talk to someone, you have to actively put in effort. It's stressful and it's exhausting. And a lot of that is down to losing these higher frequencies. So why is it that we lose these higher frequency sounds first? Well, your cochlea is shaped in this spiral, and the stereocilia down here near the opening are the ones that pick up the higher frequencies. The further around you go, the lower the frequencies they pick up. So the lower frequency stereocilia are just better protected at the heart of the cochlea, as the waves of fluid have to travel right round the spiral, losing energy as they do. Nearer the opening, they take more damage, and so you lose those higher frequencies first. It's just like waves hitting the beach. The further up the beach you go, the more protected you are. So what can we do about it? Well, let's look at what's happening in the hearing loss industry today, because for hundreds of years, the only solution to hearing loss has been to increase the volume of the sound that's coming into your ears. It started with horns that you'd hold to your ear to capture more of the sound. Then, in the 20th century, we built microphones and amplifiers that would capture the sound and boost the volume. And over time, we went from huge boxes you would have to carry around like a suitcase to the classic hearing aid you see wrapped around people's ears. For many years, the only real advancements in hearing aids was seeing how small they could be made while still having a big enough battery so they could be used all day. But there was still a huge problem, and solving this problem was the reason why, until very recently, hearing aids have cost thousands and thousands of dollars and have needed costly tests and doctor visits on top of that. So, what's the problem? Well, as we talked about before, when you lose your stereocilia with age, it's like losing some of your sound navigation. Your brain has spent your entire life learning what sounds to focus on and what sounds to ignore, and now that model your brain has doesn't work anymore, and you find it harder and harder to separate people speaking from all the other noise happening around you. In fact, as you lose your hearing, this is often why it's so hard to hear what people are saying. Your ears receive most of the sound you need, but it all becomes much more mixed together. So older hearing aids would just boost the volume of the sound, exactly like turning up the speakers on a stereo. But the problem is, this also boosted all of the background noise too, and because the quality of the speaker in old hearing aids was bad, it made it really difficult for your brain to separate what was a human voice and what was just noise. The hearing aids made sound in your ears louder, but it also made it much more difficult for your brain to process these sounds like it normally does. And this is why all modern hearing aids need a sound chip. It's not enough to just boost the volume. A great hearing aid has to immediately improve the clarity and quality of the sounds so that it's easy to focus on the most important part, the human voice. That means that this chip must be able to adjust to the different sounds coming into your ear. Is it a busy restaurant? Are you watching TV? Is someone calling you from far away or talking quietly nearby? The chip has to be able to make these improvements in real time so that it can only send the most useful sounds directly into your ear. So, that is why these chips are so important, but it's also why getting help with your hearing loss has been incredibly expensive for so long. In most cases, it's not even covered by insurance, so you have to find thousands and thousands of dollars of your own money to pay for just the cheapest hearing aid you can afford. Most of the technology in a hearing aid is quite simple. The tiny microphones and amplifiers are easy and cheap to make. That's why there are billions of smartphones around the world. And the batteries have gotten better and better, so now a tiny device can easily stay charged for 20 hours or more. But the chips were expensive. Not only did they take a lot of research to develop and manufacture, but also